First off, I just want to know, when are you taking the LSAT?
Scheduled for July of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how do you feel about the transition towards digital? How do you stand? Where do you stand on that?
I think it'll be fine. I think that, especially since I haven't really, I guess, taken the test before at all, either way, this test is going to be new for me. I've done practice tests. I've mimicked all the conditions, like even going to like the testing center, which is like SDSU, which is where I go to school. So I feel like the jump from this to digital won't make that much of a difference. And I believe is it this time around that the essay is going to be different. The essay is going to be, you'll have like a certain amount of, like you can do it after the test.
Yeah, exactly. So even starting with the June LSAT and then going forward, so including July, you won't be doing the writing sample at the test center. Instead, you'll be doing it from the comfort of your own home on your own time. I think you have up to a year to do it after your scheduled test administration. So
Right.
You won't be doing it when your brain's fried. You'll be able to do it whenever you're fresh and ready to go.
Right. That turns an already long day into like just a slightly more tolerable long day.
Yeah. And law schools know that your brain's fried after doing 5 LSAT sections. So they know that you wouldn't have been doing your best writing. But either way, since the writing sample is not scored, I wouldn't really worry too much about it, of course.
Cool.
Now, I think I saw you in the Facebook Live last night. Is that right? Were you there?
I was there for a bit. I know I actually I'll often go back and watch them after the fact. But yeah, I try to pop in and see what's going on.
Yeah, cool. It was good to see you in there because I knew like we had this scheduled for today. So it was like, a friendly face. That was good to see.
Yep.
And then it's in the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group, so you could check that out later if you want. I'm wondering, we don't have that much time, of course, and I want to make sure that we make the most of it. So I'm hoping you can share with me the biggest thing you're hoping to get out of today's session. You look back 3 to 5 years from now and you say, this was the moment that changed everything for your LSAT prep. What would need to happen?
I guess I would need to ask you, because whenever I read anything you write about your journey taking the LSAT, I really relate to it now more than ever. I always thought I related to it, but now I'm at that point where I'm at like 163, 164 on a good day. But if I have a bad day, like if I have any sort of like, if I'm losing focus even a little bit, or if I run into a section where I lose my confidence, say for example, like one of the logic games that I sent over, it's like my entire score tumbles. Like I'll go from like a 163 to a 155. Just because like I still feel at that point where I'm getting better, but like the confidence isn't there, or I don't have maybe the discipline. So I'm just wondering what needs to happen next. What's the next step for someone who is hovering around the low mid 160s and they know they need to get just that extra bit? What do I need to do? What needs to happen for me to get to that point where I can jump into like a test and just, even on a bad day, just know how to hit it, I guess?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And I think there's 2 sides to this. One of them is just knowing the content well enough that you can minimize the number of times you encounter something that you don't have a clue how to do. The LSAT is hard enough that most people don't get perfect scores, myself included. Everyone gets something wrong typically. And so it's okay to get a few things wrong. You can get 10 questions wrong and still get a 170, which is still a great place to be, of course.
Right.
So I'd say, you mentioned games. A lot of the questions that you sent me were related to games. Of course, they were games. And so I'd say, do more games. There's 86 numbered exams and a handful that are unnumbered. So you've got really, at this point, something like over 350 released LSAT logic games. And so I'd be looking between now and July, you've got quite a bit of time. So you have enough time to do all of them if you want to. And I'd recommend it. And given that we're going towards the digital format, that's what you might get in July. I would say get used to doing it on scrap paper on the side. If you have the PDFs, you have the screen in front of you, have the scrap paper separately so you can go back and forth. Because of course you don't want to be practicing on the page since you won't be on test day potentially.
Right. Okay, cool.
And for July, you also want to be ready for anything. It could be paper, it could be digital. And so that's tough. You could try to do a mix, do some timed exams on paper, do some on the screen. Either way, of course, the content's the same.
Right. When those test takers, those advanced takers are in the middle of tests, can they feel a good test versus a bad test? Because I feel like often one thing that trips me up is my own perception of how I'm doing. So like, I feel like some days my own perception is like, oh man, like this sucks. Like I already can tell like this is a bad test. Is that something that I should try to be aware of, or should I try to like just shut that down and just ignore that altogether?
I would try not to worry about it too much. And I find that it's kind of funny, but people really are not that good at telling how they're doing. People are not able to really tell how it's going in the moment. And people typically walk out of test day feeling like it didn't go well. That is
Right.
normal. It happens to everybody. We always focus more on the negative than the positive. It's just natural because we want to be perfectionists. You know, a lot of people at type A want to get 180s. And so it's natural that you'll remember disproportionately the game that went wrong or the reading comp passage that went wrong. And as you said, that can your score to tumble going forward.
Right. Yep. I feel like almost like you literally have to be like a Zen master to get through this thing, because there's so many points where you just like, they want you to question yourself. I swear. It's like half the battle is just getting yourself comfortable or confident enough to even do your best. So, but yeah.
Definitely. And so just remember that going in, you don't need to get everything right to get a great score. You can do less than perfect on a game or a passage or a handful of LR questions and still be fine out in the end. And also, there are so many cases where you're down to 2 choices and maybe you oftentimes pick the wrong one.
Right.
So that half the time you will get those right. And then in your review process, focus on all of those questions you got wrong, everything you had difficulty with as well, even the ones down to 2 and get it right. Because of course it could have just as easily gone the other way next time around.
Right. I guess another big question for me would be, at this point in my studying, I've actually been studying for this somewhat regularly for about 3 or 4 months. And I'd registered previously, but I've pushed it back, the test date. I feel like right now, there are certain things that I feel comfortable with. Like there are certain like reading comprehension, I feel comfortable with. Logical reasoning, I'm typically like, on a typical day, I'll go like -3 or -4, depending. But there's still like certain things where I'm just like, I guess not getting it. When you get to this point in your studying, how do you start identifying where your weak areas are? Like, how do you analyze your own tests and figure out, oh, well, this type of questions give me a lot of trouble? Or like, how do you see where your progress needs to be made the most, I guess?
That's a great question. And given that you're already in the 160s, you may not have that many weak areas. And obviously you want a higher score, you want all the points you can get, but it's not always about question type. It's not always about the question stem or about the type of logic game. There could be something else going on there as well. Maybe it's the method of reasoning in the LR stimulus.
Right.
Maybe there was one little rule in one particular logic game that made all the difference. And it might not be if it's ordering or if it's grouping.
Right. Right. I think the questions that I selected are pretty representative of that. Depending on our time, I'd be open to doing maybe like one game and then maybe looking at 1 or 2 LR, one of those two LR questions that I sent you. I feel like when it comes to games, these ones that I selected are kind of a perfect storm of a lot of rules that have a lot of different outcomes, and then questions that focus around like which of the following could be true, or which of the following is a complete list of. So like, of course, those questions where it doesn't really lead you in a direction. So I feel like and I feel like when I don't have a lead in direction, my whole brain shuts down. I'm like, well, there's too many possibilities. I can't do this. Logical reasoning, when there's a lot of details or like a complex argument with a lot of moving parts, same thing. Like the answer might even be simple, but I think a lot of times I'll get lost in the details where there might be like a red herring, or there might be like my mind might go in a completely different place. So I guess same thing. It's what you said before. It's always a matter of practice to some degree.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into some of these actual LSAT questions with you. But before we do that, I want to touch on one other thing you said about how to pick up those points, how to find your weak areas, because I think that's really important. And you have a good amount of time. So there's a lot you can do. And I talked already about going through the old games to shore up any potential weak areas there. But when it comes to finding weak areas overall, you're in the low 160s, so you're doing pretty well. But again, there's all those questions where you're guessing and getting it right. Yeah. You want to make sure you're reviewing those as well. And so let's say all the ones where you guessed, if you were to mark them wrong, your score would be lower, of course. And odds are you guess on 10 questions, you're not going to get all 10 wrong if you're down to 2, but that's still great review material.
Right.
So maybe your worst case scenario score where all 10 you guess on go wrong, maybe you're down to the mid 150s or something. And then in that case, you might have 20, 25, even 30 questions out of 100 that are worth reviewing. And so going through all of those and seeing, was it in the stimulus or the question stem or the answer choices? Where could you have gone wrong if we're talking logical reasoning? And then within those, if it was the answer choices, what was tempting about the wrong answer that made you pick it? What ultimately made it wrong? What's discouraging about the right answer that pushes you away from it? And what ultimately makes it correct? Or if there's a red herring in the stimulus, what's going on there? Or if there's a confusingly worded question stem, What was confusing about it? How can you better understand the keywords or phrases in the question stem so that you'll see, oh, that was actually just a regular flaw question or a regular weekend question, but it wasn't a type or a formulation that I had typically seen before.
Right. Okay, good point. Yeah, actually didn't think about that, where like we always consider like, oh, I got a question right, great, move on. But if you weren't 100% sure, then you really should go back and figure out, well, I have time. Let me figure out how to become 100% sure. What does it take? What does it take to get to that 100% confidence level?
Exactly. Now, coming into these games questions, you were talking about general questions that don't give you a clear jumping off point.
Right.
Are you typically doing the questions within a logic game in the order given?
Typically, yeah. I've tried to get in the habit of scanning the questions to figure out if there are those, they'll give you an extra piece of information, like if A is in one, but then again, like I kind of got started on the wrong foot where I did do that for so long that now even when I'm doing a time section, I'll forget. And all of a sudden I'm 2 or 3 questions in. And yeah, but I've heard that helps a lot. If you can do those questions that give you something first, you'll get more game boards and et cetera.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would try orientation first, then the local if questions, and then save the global must be true or could be trues for last. That way you build up your baseline of previous hypothetical scenarios that you know to be valid.
Right.
So yeah, trying to rearrange that a little bit could be useful. Now, I saw that one of the ones you sent me here, test 45, game 3, section 3, game 3 with the photographs.
Yes.
That's a great game. I love that game. It's funny because
You do? Great.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I love it because there have been so many other games like it that you can practice this game as well as all the others. There's test 33 game 2 with the birds in the forest. There's test 58 game 2 as well. So the volunteers, and there are many others. I can share a link with you on those if you want to check them out. Yeah. But they're virtual copies of each other where they're testing the same inferences again and again and again.
I see.
So given this, I can see perhaps what may have given you trouble. So if you look at your diagramming of the rules versus what the rules themselves say, I think we can unlock a little bit of this. So the first rule was about Wendy appears in every photograph that Selma appears in.
Right.
So what's your conditional indicator here?
So the conditional indicator would be so like how I would diagram that would be, originally I put Wendy implies, or W implies S, but now that I look at it, it might be that S implies W. Although I might be getting this wrong. I don't know.
I think you're right on the money. So what is that key word here? The key word in that rule that tells us sufficient versus necessary?
Every?
Good. Exactly. So what is every? Does every indicate sufficient or does it indicate necessary?
I would say that is necessary.
Well, let's reframe it. What if we put every at the beginning of this sentence? What's it going to look like?
So it'd be like every photograph that someone appears in, Wendy appears in.
So good. So every time, yeah.
So it's like, and when it comes to sufficient and necessary, I'm not super well versed in that terminology, but I follow what you're saying.
So if let's get away from sufficient necessary, since that's like more technical language.
Right.
What if we just deal with if then?
Okay. So it'd be if S then W.
You got it. Perfect. So you solved that for yourself here. Just taking the word every and reframing it with if then, you saw that every is actually a sufficient indicator.
Right. Okay.
Indicator. So we can frame it in many, many different ways. We can say every time Selma appears, we're going to have Wendy also. Or if we have Selma, then we will have Wendy. Or all cases in which we have Selma, we will also have Wendy.
Right.
So they did a very nasty trick here where they give us the necessary condition first.
I see.
So even though the W should go after the arrow, they put it at the beginning of the sentence.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so they're under no obligation to present things in the order that works most nicely for us, right?
Right.
So in this game, you can see that actually the first 3 rules all do this exact same thing.
Right. So, and I even look at my diagramming, I'm like, yep, when I first did the game, I was completely backwards. So it makes sense that I was struggling.
Yeah, exactly. So I saw here that you combined the rules well, they were just backwards. So you had W arrow, S arrow, U. How would you flip it around now?
That should be U implies S implies W.
Good. So you can chain them once you know which direction the conditionality goes in, which direction the arrow is pointing.
Right. Cool.
And once you have that, it's pretty smooth.
Right.
Now, I also noticed, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, actually, you go ahead. That's good.
I was going to say that another thing to think about is how you can link together most, if not all of these rules into a bigger conditional chain.
Right.
We have here the same variables featured in multiple rules, even if they didn't give us the rules in the best order that works for us.
Right.
So where do you see some of the same variables appearing multiple times?
So we'll have like a W, an R, and a Y, W, S, and U. So because like whenever I diagrammed the game originally, I like you said, I tried to link up those rules. And I think I had like I think those are the two separate ones that I did, the W, S, and the U, and the W. W, R, and Y, W, S, and U. The W is very connected. I'm seeing that now.
Yeah, awesome. We have W in the first rule and in the fourth rule.
Right.
So those two rules can link together as well. Then we have Y in, let's see, does Y appear multiple times? No, but S appears multiple times. Of course, you get that USW thing going on, but then W leads into R and T, and then R leads into Y. So they do all relate, and of course, some are positive, some are negative, but you can actually link every single variable together into one big chain.
Oh.
And if you do that, then a lot of the inferences will become pretty apparent pretty quickly.
I see. Okay. Right. Do you want us to go through that linking right here, right now, or because I kind of see it now? I'd probably have to take some time, like a few minutes, to kind of rewrite my rules. That way I can kind of see it and then link them up. But I totally see, like, I follow you. I first of all, having them switched completely messed it up. But then once you do get them in the right order, or you get the sufficient necessary correctly labeled, they can all link up together.
Yeah, awesome. I want to actually give you the chance to try this out on your own now that you have the correct ordering. I'll also send you a link to a video where I walk through exactly how I link these. And so you'll see that it is possible to link them all together into one big chain. So try it out on your own first. See if you can build the diagram organically. And then later, check your results, check your diagram against my video version. And you can look at other explanations too, of course, and see what ends up working best for you there.
Cool.
Now, I know you also sent me another question here that I think would be worth looking at. This was a game with archaeological sites.
Yes.
Test 44, section 3, game 3.
Yeah, double layer sequencing.
Yes, what was going on for you there?
I've spent a lot more time on that one, trying to figure out what went wrong. I believe here, so I think it was trying to figure out how to split it, because I think there's a couple of different ways that you could split it, and I think the way I did it originally didn't match up with any of the video tutorials that I watched. And then when I followed through the tutorials, even afterwards, I think this is just the ultimate game that challenges your ability to diagram. So I think this one, my diagramming skills just weren't quite up to par, I guess. And then you got questions like, that once again, we're very global. We're very like the last one, the tour group could visit at most how many sites that were discovered by F. So that one's a perfect storm for me. That one's like a lot of rules. You have to be a really good diagrammer, know when to split, and you have to be confident enough to like approach, to do the questions local and then global.
Is there a particular rule here that you think that you felt like you had a special trouble diagramming?
Yes, I think it was in the days from the 10th century. I really do think it was the last rule. The site that was visited third dates from a more recent century than does either the site visited first or that visited fourth. Because once I backed that rule with all the other ones, I think that's when I got lost, just because it kind of runs into, which site that O can go on and which site that G can go on. But yeah, so this one, like I said, it's, I think it's the way that rule played with the other rules that gave me a little most trouble.
And I think it's also a little bit confusing, maybe just because you have the 8th, 9th, and 10th centuries, what's more recent, what's older, because it's kind of confusing wording because we want to just think chronologically, but then saying more recent messes with that a little bit.
Right. Because 10th century is the most recent.
Exactly.
8th century. Yeah. So I think that actually tripped me up when I was doing the section time. That definitely tripped me up.
Yeah, it's confusing, and I'll be the first to agree with you on that. So let's see if there's maybe at least a way that we can frame it in a way that works better for us and get an inference at the same time.
Right.
So if we break it down bit by bit, the site visited third is more recent than some others, just to make it a little bit more general.
Right.
If the third is more recent than something else, and there's only 3 centuries, 8, 9, and 10, then which century will not be on 3?
It must not be 8.
Exactly. And then going from there, what's happening on the others, which are related to this one with first and fourth?
So first and fourth cannot be more recent. Right?
Good. Yeah, they can't be as new as the third one. So
right.
what would be the newest? Because we can say that they definitely won't be that.
So it be 8 or 9. It couldn't be 10.
Because third can't be 8.
Right.
And then the first and fourth centuries can't be the most recent, right?
Which is 10.
Good. So that they can't be 10. As you said, they'll be 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third will be more recent than something else, won't be 8. So it'll be 9 or 10.
Right.
So there's only 3. You could make that a dual option.
Right.
8/9, 9/10. It breaks it down a little bit more concretely.
Right. I think one thing, would you recommend writing that in the positive? So like my first instinct is just to write, below it like 10/. But I guess in circumstances like this, it'd be better to be writing in a positive, like it could be 8 or 9, versus just writing like what it can't be. I found that that's something I need to start doing as well.
Yeah, since we only have 2 possibilities, it's not so much that you couldn't write it down. I think it's useful too.
Right.
I don't think you necessarily need to go one way or another on that, and you'll see some explanations do that, some don't. I typically do. I don't even remember what my video says, but you could watch that if you haven't already. That might shed some light on it. I also love breaking things into multiple options, and as you'll see, when you break it down more specifically, you resolve some of that ambiguity from the dual option to say, well, it's not just 8/9 in this particular slot. It's definitely 8, or it's definitely 9.
Right. And this might have been,
as you go deeper.
This might have been something that wasn't worth doing, but I believe this is where I split like 3 was 9 or 3 was 10. And I think I tried to I think my mind thought, oh, that's a good splitting point. And I tried to do like 10 is in 3, which I think it implies G. I don't know. So I'll look at that one again, but that's a good way to reframe it. I hadn't thought about reframing it like that.
Excellent. Awesome, Dylan. Well, I'm glad that helped. We've just got a few minutes left, and so I want to make sure that we set you off on a good place going forward. What other questions do you have for me at this point, just going forward for the next couple of months?
Yeah. So, so this is I guess a studying technique or a studying question. I've oscillated from studying like crazy. Like I work part-time, so I've oscillated from studying literally every hour that I wasn't sleeping or working to getting burnt out, and then taking like 2 weeks off, and then trying to see if I could be more realistic. But then I don't always know what to study. So I'll know I'm supposed to study tomorrow for like 3 hours, but then I'll sit down and be like, well, I spend the first hour what am I supposed to be studying? Do you have any recommendations on how to build, now that I have 2 months and I know where I need to go? I know that I need to gain those extra couple points. What should I do? Should I build a study plan, like an Excel spreadsheet? I don't know. Do you have any recommendations or advice?
Definitely, Dylan. This has definitely been an area of focus of mine, actually. So, because you need a plan of attack. It's too hard to go it alone, just using the books and just using the prep tests, because people just fall into this trap where they just do all the prep tests in order.
Yeah, and I've burned through. I made the same mistake you did. I've burned through a lot of them. Especially the later ones, I haven't. But I burned through them way too fast. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think in this case, what you want to do is you want to slow down to speed up, meaning you focus on a handful of exams in more detail. And if you still have some work to do on your foundation, you can focus your studying in 3 phases: accuracy first, doing questions by type untimed, then pacing with individual timed sections, and then bring it all together in the last phase with full-length 5-section timed exams. But you want to do some questions by type just to build your foundation, especially any weak areas you discover along the way, if they are particular question types. On the other hand, if you're not finding any particular trends, or you just find that you get a lot of necessary assumption questions wrong or a lot of flaw questions wrong, that could simply be because there are a lot of those questions out there on the exam, right?
Right.
Selection bias. So figure out if you're getting a certain question type disproportionately wrong more often, or if there's a certain type that you just always hate to see. That's, of course, the area that you need to focus on. I've got some study schedules on my website. I have free week-by-week ones. I also have more detailed premium day-by-day plans where I really break it down bit by bit, not just doing ordering, then grouping, then combination games, but doing the easiest ordering games first and working up to the more difficult ordering games. And I'll also tell you, read these pages in these prep books, read these articles on my site, and then do the practice problems. But I really try to systematize it, because the worst thing you can do is just burn through a lot of recent material that isn't available anymore to measure yourself later.
Right. All right.
So I gather that you haven't used the schedules yet. Are there any resources of mine that you have used?
Yeah. So, because I've used so many different ones that I've kind of like lost track with what I've done. But a lot of your like the sheets that you've created, a lot of like the general guides I've printed out and I have them in my study materials. But I think I've spent a lot more time with 7Sage. I think that might not be working for me as much. So I need to dig deeper into your resources, and see what that could offer as well. But yeah, I like that advice.
Great. Well, you definitely have plenty of time to make a major change in your LSAT studying as you find your weak areas and focus on them. So I think you're in a good place. And just to wrap up, what would you say is the biggest insight that you got from our conversation today?
The biggest insight, I actually think is, I don't know, it sounds weird, but the way that we've kind of talked, it kind of reminds me that like I can do this, I guess. I think I've spent so many weeks and months like studying on my own with no external input, that having somebody else kind of say like I'm doing good and that, you know, I just need to pivot a little bit in my study strategy, that's a huge thing. To have an external voice kind of tell you, hey, you're doing good, just try this. Because like, you know, you spend enough time alone by yourself, you go insane. But that and reframing, I think when it comes to logic games especially, some of the strategies that you kind of touched on with reframing these rules, or really just thinking about them in a slightly different way, and then just systematic things like doing certain questions first, that helped me.
I'm glad to hear it, Dylan, because you are doing well. You're doing everything right. I appreciate the investment you've made in yourself, showing up so powerfully today, and your prep leading up to this session. I have no doubt that you'll continue to improve over the next 2.5 months.
I hope so. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. So I want to thank you for taking the time today, and please keep in touch as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dylan. Take care.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank you and give you some feedback about how I felt about this. I feel like the way you're able to pivot and change your teaching strategies really helps me. I've had some other experiences with tutors where if I ask a question, which I can tell the way they react to it, it was a dumb question, or it was a low level question. And other experiences I've had, it's made me feel kind of bad when the other person reacts to it and they get frustrated that I'm not getting it. But for example, in the logic game we were doing when we were talking about sufficient and necessary, you changed your teaching strategy and you reframed the question in a way that I understood, and then I immediately got it. And that made me feel good. So number one, I got it, and number two, you were patient and you were willing to work with me. Those two things together really helped me have a success and feel really good about learning something and making progress with a logic game. So I really appreciate that.
That's really nice of you to say. I appreciate your feedback on that, because that's exactly what I strive to do. I actually had my own experience with a tutor back when I was studying, and he tried to be nice about it, but at one point he let out this sigh that made me feel like a complete idiot. And he would just kind of walk through the problem and say, oh, it's easy, you just do X, Y, Z. And it was easy when he would do it.
Right.
But then when I was doing it on my own later, I kind of hit a wall and didn't know where to go next. So it means a lot to me that you said that. I try to kind of reframe things and explain it in the way that works best for the student, not just some prescribed, pre-recorded lecture.
It shows. It really shows. It's really cool, being the student in that case, because I can totally feel myself get nervous and feel myself get like almost like apprehensive that, that we're miscommunicating, but then you kind of step in and then you find a way to get that communication to go through. So it felt really good. Yeah.
That's great to hear. Well, when you're in New York, definitely please reach out. If I'm holding a meetup, and I'd love to have you come by.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Well, take it easy. All the best in your prep, and please keep in touch.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Have a good rest of your day. Good luck with all the rest of the sessions. And yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All the best.